Imagine a company with no natural resources, no oil, no vast land, no easy safety net. Yet this company sells smartphones to billions, ships cars across every continent, and powers the digital world with microscopic chips. That company is South Korea. If South Korea were a corporation, it would not be a startup. It would not be a lifestyle brand. It would be an export-based tech conglomerate designed to survive only by selling to the world. More than half of its economy depends on foreign demand. When global trade slows, this company feels the pain immediately. When geopolitics shift, its entire balance sheet is at risk. At the core of this corporation are its business units, Samsung, Hyundai, and a small circle of industrial giants that dominate electronics, cars, ships, steel, and energy. They do not just represent South Korea. They are a South Korea. This is a nation rebuilt with corporate discipline, speed over comfort, efficiency over safety, global scale over domestic stability. But here is the uncomfortable question. What happens when a country runs itself like a corporation and the global market begins to turn against it? This is the story of how South Korea became one of the most efficient economic machines on Earth, and why that same system may now be its greatest vulnerability. Every corporation has a founding moment. For South Korea, that moment was not innovation, it was survival. In the early 1960s, South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. No capital, no technology, no global influence. Its GDP per capita was comparable to the poorest nations in Africa. Then came a radical corporate-style decision. The government chose a single strategy: export or fail. Under the leadership of Park Chung-hee, South Korea rewired its entire national system to behave like a company chasing foreign revenue. The logic was brutally simple. The domestic market was too small, so the world would become South Korea's customer. The state picked a few families, a few firms, and gave them everything they needed to win: cheap credit, protection from competition, clear export targets. In return, there was only one rule: deliver results or lose support. This is how the chaebol system was born. Not as corruption, not as tradition, but as an emergency growth engine. Companies like Samsung and Hyundai were not encouraged to be creative. They were ordered to be competitive. Steel before services, factories before finance, volume before branding. South Korea was not trying to build the best products in the world. It was trying to build anything the world would buy. And it worked. Exports exploded. Factories scaled at record speed. Within one generation, South Korea transformed itself from a war-torn economy into an industrial powerhouse. But this growth came with a permanent structural choice. South Korea did not diversify its economic logic. It locked itself into the export model. Like a company that never develops a strong home market, South Korea became exceptionally efficient and permanently exposed to forces beyond its control. In the next part, we look inside the chaebol system itself and how a handful of conglomerates came to dominate an entire nation. Every conglomerate has divisions. South Korea has something more extreme. They are called chaebol. If South Korea were a corporation, the chaebol would be its core business units. Massive, vertically integrated empires controlling entire industries from top to bottom. At the center stands Samsung. On paper, Samsung is an electronics company. In reality, it is a parallel economy. Smartphones, semiconductors, displays, construction, insurance, logistics. Samsung does not just sell products. It builds cities, finances homes, and shapes labor markets. Then there is Hyundai. Cars are only the surface. Hyundai controls shipbuilding, heavy machinery, steel, construction, and global logistics. It builds the vehicles and the ports they leave from. Alongside them stand LG and SK Group, each operating like a self-contained corporation inside the larger national company. Together, the top chaebol generate a staggering share of South Korea's exports, employment, and R&D spending. This concentration was not an accident. It was a design choice. For decades, the estate believed scale was survival. Only massive firms could compete with American and Japanese giants. Only conglomerates could move fast enough to matter globally. And for a long time, this logic worked. The chaebol system delivered speed, coordination, relentless execution. But it also created a dangerous dependency. Small and medium businesses became suppliers, not competitors. Innovation flowed top-down, not bottom-up. Risk was concentrated in a handful of corporate balance sheets. In corporate terms, South Korea optimized for efficiency by putting most of its value into very few entities, which raises a critical question. What happens when the global market turns and the fate of an entire country depends on the performance of just a few companies? In the next part, we look at the engine that powers this system: exports, trade, and South Korea's obsession with the global customer. Every company lives or dies by its customers. South Korea made a radical choice. It chose the entire world. Exports are not just a sector of the Korean economy. They are its operating system. More than half of South Korea's GDP is tied directly or indirectly to foreign demand. In some industries, semiconductors, ships, displays, the number is far higher. If South Korea were a corporation, its revenue chart would look dangerously simple: sell more abroad or shrink at home. The port of Busan functions like a corporate revenue gateway. Every container represents survival. Every delayed shipment represents risk. This obsession reshaped everything. Factories were optimized for scale, not flexibility. Products were designed for global standards, not local preferences. Corporate strategy followed one metric above all others: export volume. The global customer became the ultimate boss. When the United States upgrades smartphones, Korean factories run overtime. When Europe slows car demand, Korean assembly lines go quiet. When China's economy fluctuates, Korean growth forecasts change overnight. South Korea does not control these markets. It reacts to them. This is the hidden cost of extreme export efficiency. Unlike large domestic economies, South Korea cannot rely on internal consumption to absorb shocks. There is no fallback market big enough to stabilize growth. In corporate terms, South Korea built an incredible sales machine, but never diversified its customer base. One global recession can erase years of progress. One trade war can disrupt entire supply chains. And yet, this dependence created something extraordinary. To survive global competition, South Korean firms became technologically aggressive. They did not innovate for elegance. They innovated for dominance, which brings us to the heart of this conglomerate, technology. In the next part, we examine how South Korea turned R&D into a national survival strategy, and why its tech dominance is both its greatest strength and its most fragile asset. When a company cannot compete on resources, it competes on technology. South Korea understood this earlier than most nations. Lacking oil, land, or raw materials, it made a calculated decision: out-innovate everyone else. If South Korea were a corporation, R&D would be its largest long-term investment. Not marketing, not real estate, but laboratories, engineers, and patents. Today, South Korea spends over 4% of its GDP on research and development, one of the highest ratios in the world. At the center of this strategy stands Samsung. Samsung is not simply a consumer electronics brand. It is one of the most advanced semiconductor manufacturers on Earth. Memory chips, logic chips, displays that define modern screens. These components are invisible to consumers, but essential to nearly every digital product in existence. This is not innovation for prestige. This is innovation for leverage. By controlling critical technologies deep inside global supply chains, South Korea ensures that the world cannot easily replace it. The same logic applies to batteries, displays, and industrial automation. Korean firms focus on components that competitors must rely on. In corporate terms, South Korea did not chase brand loyalty alone. It chased a structural dependency. But this strategy comes with pressure. R&D cycles are expensive. Technological leadership is temporary. One missed generation can erase billions in value. Unlike diversified economies, South Korea has little margin for error. There is no secondary growth engine waiting in the background. Every breakthrough must arrive on time. Every factory must run at scale. Every technology bet must succeed. This is the cost of competing at the top of the global tech hierarchy. In the next part, we examine the human side of this model: the workforce discipline, social pressure, and demographic risks that keep this corporate machine running. Every high-performing corporation extracts a price. For South Korea, that price is paid by its people. Behind the efficiency, the speed, and the global competitiveness is one of the most disciplined workforces in the world. Long hours, intense hierarchy, relentless performance pressure. South Korea did not build its economy on creativity first. It built it on execution. From classrooms to offices, the system rewards endurance. Students are trained for exams like future employees. Workers are trained to outperform global competitors, not to question the system. For decades, this model delivered results. Productivity rose, skills accumulated, the workforce became world-class. But corporate systems optimized for output often ignore sustainability. South Korea now faces a structural risk no technology can easily fix: demographics. It has one of the lowest birth rates on Earth. Its population is aging faster than almost any advanced economy. In corporate terms, the talent pipeline is shrinking. Fewer young workers must support more retirees. Fewer engineers must sustain massive R&D budgets. Fewer consumers must stabilize domestic demand. This creates a silent contradiction. The export machine requires constant growth, but the workforce that powers it is contracting. Social pressure intensifies, work-life balance erodes, the cost of maintaining global competitiveness rises every year. South Korea is still one of the most capable economic systems in the world, but it is running hotter, faster, and thinner than ever before. And when a corporation pushes its human capital too hard, something eventually breaks. In the next part, we zoom out to the global stage and examine how geopolitics, trade wars, and supply chain conflicts threaten an economy built almost entirely on exports. Every global corporation eventually discovers a hard truth. Markets are not neutral, they are political. For South Korea, this reality is unavoidable. Its two most important partners sit on opposite sides of the global power struggle, the United States and China. The United States is South Korea's security guarantor and key technology ally. China is its largest trading partner. In corporate terms, South Korea depends on two major clients who don't trust each other. This creates constant strategic tension. When the United States restricts advanced semiconductor exports, Korean chipmakers must choose compliance over revenue. When China retaliates economically, Korean firms lose access to one of their largest markets. There is no neutral option. South Korea cannot decouple without a severe economic pain. It cannot ignore security alliances without existential risk. This is the vulnerability of an export-based conglomerate. Supply chains once optimized purely for efficiency are now reshaped by politics, sanctions, and national security concerns. Factories are duplicated, costs rise, margins shrink, even technology leadership becomes fragile. Semiconductors are no longer just products. They are strategic assets. A single regulatory decision in Washington or a single escalation in East Asia can ripple through Korean factories, employment, and GDP forecasts. South Korea did not choose this battlefield, but its business model forces it to operate inside it. Like a multinational corporation caught between rival superpowers, South Korea must constantly hedge, adapt, and absorb shocks that it cannot control, and this pressure is accelerating. In the next part, we examine whether South Korea can evolve from a pure export machine into something more balanced, more resilient, and more sustainable. Every mature corporation eventually faces the same challenge. Growth slows, risks concentrate. The old formula stops working. South Korea has reached that moment. The export machine is still powerful, but it is no longer enough on its own. Global demand is more volatile. Technology cycles are shorter. Geopolitical risk is permanent. So the question becomes unavoidable. Can South Korea build a second growth engine? In recent years, the country has tried to rebalance startups, software, content, finance, services aimed not at factories but at people. Seoul promotes itself as a startup hub. Venture capital is expanding. New firms are encouraged to think beyond manufacturing. But structural habits are hard to break. The chaebol still dominate talent, capital, and political influence. Risk-taking outside large corporations remains limited. Failure is still socially expensive. In corporate terms, South Korea is trying to innovate, while still protecting its legacy divisions. Domestic consumption remains relatively weak. Household debt is high. An aging population spends cautiously, not aggressively. This limits the ability of the home market to absorb shocks. When exports fall, the country understands the problem. The execution is the challenge. Transitioning from an export-first economy to a balanced, innovation-driven one requires cultural change, not just policy. And culture moves slower than capital. South Korea is no longer a developing economy chasing survival. It is an advanced system trying to redesign itself without breaking what already works. In the next part, we step back and assess the balance sheet, the strengths, the hidden liabilities, and the true resilience of this national conglomerate. Every corporation eventually faces a moment of accounting, not profits and losses, but strengths and risks. South Korea's balance sheet is impressive. On the asset side, world-class manufacturing, global technology leadership, highly educated human capital, export networks that reach every major market. Few countries can scale complex products as fast and as reliably. Few can move from design to mass production with such precision. This is corporate excellence at the national level. But now, look at the liabilities: extreme export dependence, concentration in a handful of conglomerates, demographic decline, geopolitical exposure beyond its control. In corporate terms, South Korea carries high operational leverage. When conditions are good, growth is powerful. When conditions deteriorate, the downside is amplified. A slowdown in semiconductors can affect GDP. A trade dispute can affect employment. A demographic shift can affect long-term innovation. There is little redundancy in the system. Unlike large consumer economies, South Korea cannot easily pivot inward. Unlike resource-rich nations, it cannot fall back on commodities. Unlike financial hubs, it cannot monetize neutrality. Its strength and its risk come from the same source: global integration. And yet this system is not fragile. It is disciplined, adaptive, extremely fast at execution. South Korea has survived wars, crises, and financial collapse. It has rebuilt itself multiple times under pressure. The question is not whether this conglomerate can survive. The question is how much change it can absorb without losing the qualities that made it successful. In the final part, we answer the core question of this series. What does South Korea's corporate model teach us? Not just about one country, but about how modern economies survive in a volatile world? If South Korea were a company, it would be admired and closely watched. Admired for its speed, its discipline, its ability to compete at the highest level without natural advantages. Watched because its margin for error is thin. South Korea proves that a nation can engineer success through focus, execution, and global integration. It shows what happens when scale, technology, and exports are aligned behind a single strategy, but it also reveals the limits of that model. A country is not a corporation. People are not employees forever. Growth cannot be infinite in a finite world. The same system that built South Korea's prosperity now demands adaptation, less dependence on a few industries, less pressure on a shrinking workforce, more balance between efficiency and resilience. South Korea's next chapter will not be written in factories alone. It will be written in how it treats risk, people, and uncertainty in a global economy that rewards speed but punishes fragility. The most valuable asset may no longer be scale dash dash, but flexibility. South Korea is no longer trying to survive. It is trying to evolve, and the outcome will matter far beyond its borders. Because in a world where countries increasingly behave like companies, South Korea may be one of the clearest case studies of what works and what eventually must change. If this perspective changed the way you see economies, stay with the series, because the next company may look very different dash dash, but face the same impossible choices.